Now, when factoring our trinomial, and when you notice that our GCF is 1, we'll also have the case where our leading term, our a, is going to be negative. So we'll see what we have to do there. So the second part of example 1, we have to factor negative 4x squared plus 4x plus 3. So if you look at all three terms, we look at the negative 4, the 4, and the 3, and there isn't a common factor other than 1 that you can divide each term by. But since our leading term is negative, we're going to factor out the negative first. So just to make sure that this is correct, we're going to write our three terms with our box. So negative 4x squared, 4x, and 3. And it looks like the greatest common factor is a negative 1. So when we factor out a negative 1, we're left with a 4x squared, negative 4x, and negative 3. And keep in mind, when you factor out a number or common factor, you're essentially just dividing each term by that number. So when you divide negative 4x squared by negative 1, you're left with a positive 4x squared. 4x divided by negative 1 is a negative 4x, and 3 divided by negative 1 is negative 3. So now that we're looking at this bottom row, the greatest common factor is just 1. So we multiply those two factors out, and our GCF is negative 1. So we go back to our original problem, and we're dividing out a negative 1, and we're left with what's inside of this bottom row, 4x squared minus 4x minus 3, right in our parentheses. So then you're looking at all three terms, and since we factored out the GCF already, which is negative 1, we're going to make our diamond, and in the bottom diamond is going to be our A times our C. So our A is 4, our C is negative 3, so when we multiply those out, we get a negative 12. The top diamond is going to be the B term, which is a negative 4, so we're going to write that in the top part of our diamond. And now we have to think of two numbers that multiply together to get a negative 12, and add together to get a positive 4. I'm sorry, negative 4. So I'm thinking negative 6 and positive 2, because negative 6 times positive 2 is going to be negative 12. Negative 6 plus 2 will give us a negative 4, so that works perfectly. So I'm going to replace my negative 4x with the two numbers that I've written in my blank diamonds, negative 6 and 2, and keeping the x with it. So I have a negative 1 on the outside, keep that there for now. I'm left with a 4x squared minus 6x plus 2x minus 3. So just kind of keep the negative 1 on the outside. We're going to just constantly rewrite it down as we go along and factor this quadratic here. So we're going to group the first two terms, 4x squared minus 6x, group the second two terms, 2x minus 3. And in the first group, we have 4x squared minus 6x, and we have to find the GCF, or the greatest common factor, between just these two terms, which looks like you can divide 4 by 2 as well as a negative 6 by 2, and they both have an x, so we're going to take out a 2x from both terms. So we're left with a 2x minus 3. So essentially, again, we're dividing out 2x from 4x squared and dividing 2x from negative 6x. So the second group, it looks like the greatest common factor of 2x minus 3 is 1, so we're going to write down plus 1, and then we're left with just a 2x minus 3, since the GCF of these two terms is just 1. Close off our brackets, or with brackets, and we're going to group the first product together and the second product together. And if you look at as a whole this entire problem, they both have a 2x minus 3 common binomial factor, so then we're going to factor that out from both groups. So we're left with a negative 1 on the outside still, 2x minus 3 factored, and in the first group we're left with a 2x, and then we're left with a plus 1 in the second group. So then we can rewrite this problem with the negative 1 just as a negative, and remove the blue brackets as negative the quantity 2x minus 3 times 2x plus 1. And this would be completely factored.